So welcome everyone. This is an online policy discussion organized by the ProGender project, which is a digital hub that focuses on gender, the COVID-19 crisis and its aftermath. The project is funded by the EEA grants, and it is coordinated by the Center for Gender Studies of Panteion University in Athens. And we are collaborating with the Institute for Gender Equality and Difference of the University of Iceland and the Center for Gender Research of the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, as well as the collective Stibrisa, which is based in Athens, and the Research and Education Collective. So our project has several topics that you can find in our website and our Facebook page. We have organized several discussions related to gender and COVID-19. But today's topic is very important as it brings to the forefront the intersectional gender aspects of the pandemic. And these are often silenced in mainstream debates. We have witnessed a lot of changes during the past year. And for many of us, gender issues have become more important than ever. Although, however, women and gender, and especially gender-based violence, have come to the forefront and they have received a lot of public attention, especially in Greece, where we had, for the first time, witnessed the Me Too movement. The problems that migrants and refugees face because of gender inequalities and because of their sexuality, and because of other multiple factors that intersect with gender, such as ethnicity, class, race, legal status, make COVID a particularly challenging period, especially for those on the move. And the challenges and questions that we need to address are multiple. We have several speakers today who are going to talk about different aspects of these relationships from Greece, Iceland, and Norway. We have several questions that we need to discuss. So we will start with short presentations by the participants. And while these presentations take place, you can always post your questions and remarks on the chat. And at the end of the presentations, we're going to open the discussion. You can ask questions in person or send us your questions. You can also send us questions in Greek and we can translate them if you don't feel comfortable speaking in English. And I would like to remind everyone that this session is being recorded. So if you don't want to appear on the video, which will be made available after the end of the discussion, please turn your camera off and send us your questions on the chat. So we are now starting with Tatiana Papanastasiou. She's a protection associate of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the UNHCR, in Athens. The floor is yours, Tatiana. You need to...
Yes, I just did. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak for this really interesting matter. So I am going to briefly speak today about the effects during the pandemic on gender, and specifically on prevention and response to gender-based violence through the work that the UNHCR is doing with the refugee population in Greece. Just to let you know that all the pictures that you will see in the presentation are taken by the UNHCR website. So they have been taken by UNHCR colleagues, so it's all in accordance with the relevant procedures and copyright framework. So very briefly, in case you do not know, just to explain what UNHCR does globally and in Greece, so that you understand our perspective and how we get the information that I'm going to present to you on the effects of the pandemic on issues of gender and gender-based violence. So globally, UNHCR has 3 main targets. We offer crucial emergency assistance as long as the refugee crisis lasts. We ensure the protection of the basic human rights of refugees, and we support them in rebuilding their lives with durable solutions, which could be relocation, voluntary repatriation, or integration. Especially in Greece, integration is the focus. Now, specifically in Greece, and regarding issues of gender-based violence, we have been cooperating, supporting the relevant authorities to coordinate the prevention, risk mitigation, and response on GBV, gender-based violence. We also have different programs. For example, we have a very small program that we provide the short-term emergency accommodation to high-risk cases, as well as other material assistance. We also provide non-food items to the population, especially residing in the reception and education centers and the mainland sites in some cases, but now mostly focusing on the borders. And also we're supporting with the upgrading of the infrastructure. We have also different programs where we provide information, counseling, psychosocial support, and legal aid through UNHCR colleagues or through partners. And we are focusing on prevention and empowerment activities, again through either directly or through partners. And we also are doing monitoring for different issues regarding gender-based violence, and we are developing certain guidelines and also engaged a lot in capacity building. And of course, we support the policies and actions on integration. Just a reminder that when we're talking about gender-based violence, we are referring to everyone. Gender-based violence affects everyone. Of course, globally, women and girls are disproportionately affected, and they are at heightened risk. And also asylum seekers, refugees, stateless persons, internally displaced persons, they are also at risk of gender-based violence, irrespective of their age, gender, or other diversity considerations. So in general, we know and we see that it affects everyone. Now, we have, unfortunately, what is labeled as the shadow pandemic. So during the situation with coronavirus, we already know that 1 in 3 women worldwide experience physical or sexual violence, mostly by an intimate partner, what we call domestic violence. But since the pandemic, we know that this has intensified. And there are emerging data and reports that show that all these types of violence against women, girls particularly, but also against other groups, as we saw, have intensified. Now, the first thing that was hit, in our opinion, was prevention of gender-based violence, prevention activities. And we also had a lot of prevention activities that we were conducting, and more that we're planning. But unfortunately, discussions on gender stereotypes and deconstructing the gender stereotypes and the different power dynamics were deemed irrelevant in this situation, even though, of course, these were reproduced, these power dynamics were reproduced at this time of crisis, and they led to an increase of violence. Also, for example, safe access to basic needs for everyone acquired different meaning. It was debated what is a basic need. For example, is education a basic need? Unfortunately, for the refugee population, their access to education was put on hold for quite a long time, both for children and for adults. And of course, we do know that this is a factor that that leads to gender-based violence being intensified. We will also see shortly that the access to healthcare was also challenging and limited. So all these sectors were affected. Also, UNHCR pays particular importance in the participation of the community in all stages of programming. So this is what we call community-based approach. And what we're trying to do is to have the community take part in the whole decision-making process for all the matters that concern their lives. In Greece, we had already established in some locations what we call the women's committees before the coronavirus situation, and these women, these groups of women, they had received the capacity building in gender-related issues, as well as peer-to-peer support, first psychological aid, safe disclosure and referral of cases of gender-based violence. So they had received the capacity building on all these issues. Now, unfortunately, these meetings stopped. Because of the situation and because we didn't have access as before to the places where they reside. However, it is very important to note that these committees, they continue to function. And these women continue to provide peer-to-peer support during the pandemic, even contacting UNHCR and partners in case a woman needed to be urgently referred to specialized services. We haven't fully assessed the impact of these interventions and support that these refugee women provided to their peers, since we were not expecting, of course, something like this to happen. So we hadn't developed a tool like this. We didn't expect that we wouldn't be in contact with them for quite some time. But we do know that this impact was not insignificant. On the contrary, it seems that many women found support by their peers, and we consider this as a good practice that kind of supported many of them in getting at least this feeling of having someone to speak to for what they were going through, and what, as we know, had intensified during especially the lockdown. Now, moving on to response to gender-based violence and how this was affected by the pandemic. You can see here a snapshot with data from a tool we have developed to collect data from UNHCR staff and implementing partners that are specialized on gender-based violence and trafficking in human beings, so in supporting also trafficking victims. Okay, we are now finalizing the analysis for the second half of 2020. So this refers to the first half of 2020. And you can see the reported cases of GBV by type and place of incident. So whether this happened in Greece during transit, the incident of gender-based violence, or in the country of origin. And also you have a table on the right that shows the place of the incident and the number of incidents. So as I said, we're now finalizing the analysis for the second half of 2020 to have a full picture, but we do know already that the number of survivors, as we say, of the people who experienced the GBV dropped significantly in the second half of the year. Why? Not because gender-based violence didn't take place, on the contrary, but because they didn't have access to services, or they couldn't report in the way that they were reporting before. So this is, we saw really a very big change. Just to let you know that in the first half of 2020, around 773 people were supported. However, in the second half, it was around 400 people. So this is very important. And also it's important to note that victims of trafficking were included in this. So also they could not report. as the rest. So these are the main sectors that were affected in response to gender-based violence. So it's access to health, including mental health and psychosocial support, legal and security, and socioeconomic issues. These are some of the challenges. This is not an exhaustive list at all, but these are some of the main challenges that we have identified during the pandemic in response to gender-based violence. So we saw limited access to health services, including mental health services and PEP treatment, which is urgently required after a sexual assault. Lack of access to services for the termination of pregnancy, which was also very important. There were many women who wanted to terminate their pregnancy and they could not go to the hospital because of the situation. Lack of provision for an exception of the restriction of movement to urgently seek help from the authorities. There were women who were trying to approach the police station to file a lawsuit against their abuser and could not for different reasons. The service providers were overwhelmed. There was limited access to emergency shelter because often a coronavirus test was asked. And also there was limited access to employability services and employment, which was again very important and delayed their empowerment. These were, I mean, we have identified several challenges, but these were the main ones. So this is it, from me. I think that we will take questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tatiana. This was really interesting. And maybe we will go back to the data that you presented when the questions arise. We will move on now to Olga Lafazani, who is an adjunct lecturer at Dimokriteio University and postdoc researcher at the Hellenic Research Foundation, and also an activist in the Greek anti-racist movement. Olga, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. Actually, what I was thinking to start today is somehow to start a discussion around the very basic campaign of the Greek government during the pandemic. And the basic slogan of this campaign to protect was, "We are staying at home, we are staying safe." So actually, what I will try to discuss today evolves around the question, how safe is home? And staying at home and staying safe, is it one continuous thing, or is it actually two axes that can be really separated? And how many differentiations does the meaning of home has for different subjects? I was reading in a book published recently, like in 2012, and it's entitled "The Meaning of Home," and I quote, "A home fulfills many needs. It's a place of self-expression, a vessel of memories, a refuge from the outside world, a cocoon where we can feel nurtured and let down our guard." And I was really thinking about this quote, that such a reading, the meaning of home, it really discloses the point of view of the privileged. And so how many differentiations and exclusions in terms of class, of gender, of race are entailed in this meaning of home? So to start with, it is really, really different to stay at home if you live in a luxurious house with a big garden in the suburbs, and to stay at home if you live in a small basement with a lot of people and you have like 40 square meters. For example, a very dear family, some friends of mine coming from Pakistan, As they are migrants, they are racialized in Athens, so they don't have actually access, as most of the migrants, to better housing conditions. So even if they can afford to pay more money for their rent, they cannot access the houses in Athens. So this actually means that they are kind of forced to live in worse conditions, in worse houses, in very old apartments, usually in the basements or in the first floors that are not renovated at all. So this family I started talking about, it's 6 people. It's a couple with 4 children, and they live in a basement of 40 square meters. So obviously, when their son got the virus, they didn't even have the luxury to isolate him in one room or in one space. So the whole family got it. And also, what does it mean, this e-learning of the public schools that are closed for such a family? 3 of their children are going to preliminary school, and they are also very active children. What does it mean to stay at home if you have 3 children in this age? Only one computer for e-learning. Is it the same? Is it this the safe house that is described from the ministry's campaign? Also, one more, like, very interconnected to this campaign was the campaign to work from our houses. But isn't this also a very privileged position? How many of us have the ability to work from our computer and just to be online or to send some data, or I don't know? All the people who work manually, they have to go to work. And if they do not go to work, usually they have threats from their employers that they will be fired. For example, I did an interview with Fatima, one woman from Syria that was working as a hairdresser, and when the store was closed due to COVID restrictions, her employer forced her in a way to go to work in houses, and told her that if you don't do that now and we lose our clients, we will never hire you back when the store opens again. And because she has her children, she didn't want to actually to pass by all these houses, but still she felt totally obliged to do it. And at the same time, these are exactly the people who will use the, the mass transportation, the public transportation. They don't have another option to go, I don't know, to use their own car uh, to move around the city. So this is one more extra insecurity or insafety. And so is the house, as I read from the quote in the beginning, is it a refugee from the outside world and a cocoon where we can feel nurtured and let down our guard when, for example, it's coming to women who are experiencing domestic violence? Is it a place that you can leave down your guards? You can let down your guards? How domestic is your house? How safe is your house when you have when you're experiencing domestic violence? And what actually uh, is actually domestic violence intensified in the period of confinement due to the pandemic? Like if your husband does not even go to work. So what does that mean? And also, of course, and this would be my last point because I don't want to take a lot of time, what does it mean to stay at home if you don't have a home? What is happening with homeless people? But also with all these people, these thousands of people who live in refugee camps and in hotspots all over Greece. What does it mean, stay at home, if your home is a container that you share with another 2 families, another family? What does it mean to stay at home if you live in a tent or even in 2 carton boxes covered with plastic? This is what is happening, for example, in in and around the Moria hotspots for a very long time now. What does it mean, stay at home? And even in these places, in the camps, what does it mean to keep the distance? Is it possible to keep a distance if you have to queue for hours to get like some food or to get some legal advice or whatever you need? How can you keep a distance where the tents is and the containers are to such a close proximity to each other? Moria camp is just a few, not square meters. Okay, you understand what I want. It's a small place, and it has housed even 20,000 people. It is the bigger city of Lesbos. So what do you mean to keep a distance if you live under these conditions? What distance can you keep? Can you wash your hands in the camps? Even these very, very basic instructions, can you follow them if you live in a camp? Is there water available, clean water for everyone? Is there soap? Can you wash your hands when you live in a camp? So I was reading in a Greek newspaper the other day that there was like this writer, and obviously a man, and he was saying, okay, somehow the words were, the virus does not care if you are black or white, if you're a man or a woman, if you're poor or rich, it attacks everyone. And okay, that's obviously true. But still, the means you have to protect yourself, to keep yourself safe in a period of this pandemic are totally different, depending on your class, positions, intertwined with gender and race. That's it.
Thank you, Olga. That was really to the point, and I think it touched us all, what you described, and I think it will be an important starting point for the discussion. Now we will move on to the next speaker, Alma Belém Serato. She's a licensed psychologist in Iceland and a member of the Icelandic Psychological Association. She runs her own psychological office and works with immigrant and refugee communities. She also provides services to municipalities in the context of the Icelandic Integration Program and the Vocational Rehabilitation Fund.
Hi, yeah.
Hi, Alma.
Hi. Well, thank you for having me here. Thank you for the invitation. I would like to share my screen. Just please tell me if it works. I think it's now it working. So yeah, we're going to address all these needs for migration and gender during the pandemic. Just a brief introduction, and just to remember that migration has been a collective experience for humankind throughout history, and is actually the history of the evolution of human beings. We should keep this in mind. However, every time it's getting more difficult to move. Yeah, we're gonna talk now about migration like an umbrella term, but we know there's different meanings for migrant, asylum seeker, and refugee. Psychologically speaking, migration is critical situation because it needs to process. The individual had to address the process of adaptation and readjustment, and the need to belong, also known as belongingness, a human emotional need to affiliate with and be accepted by members of a group. Sadly, many people are still discriminated based on their in-group. The relation on discrimination and well-being. We can understand discrimination as a process in which the dominant group privilege are maintained at the expense of the subordinate group or groups. Discrimination is often understood to be rational. Discrimination is associated with stress-related somatic symptoms such as headaches and backache. Immigrants and refugees usually refer the somatic symptoms to the general practitioner. When they have this distress or discomfort, the first contact with the health provider is the general practitioner. But sometimes is a lack of a psychological intervention. It's important as well here not to pathologize or medicalize natural events. Of course, there's a lot of discomfort, there's a lot of suffering, but it's better to provide the skills and the resources for better adjustment. Discrimination can lead to lowered economic and social status and losses, especially now with the pandemic. Immigrants and mostly refugees, well, cannot say under my experience that refugees lost their jobs because actually they were still looking for jobs, sending applications, but immigrants start to lose their jobs. These experiences that when the individual have the feeling of lack of control can lead to diminished self-esteem and feelings of helplessness, inducing depression, when sometimes it's called like lack of motivation from the outsiders. There's a like immigrants or refugees are not interested in adaptation or even if they're lazy, even those are symptoms to address in the psychologically speaking, in the clinical area. There's always a symptom of something. Mostly depression and major depression. We're talking about often about major depression. At this point, when we're talking about the immigrants, we know that women experience discrimination based on many characteristics: gender, ethnicity, age, and socioeconomic status. That we were talking about previously, the other participants about this intersection. So it's really a stressful situation for women. Many social problems like racism, sexism are often overlapping, creating multiple levels of social injustice. Poverty, inequality, and discrimination endanger women's well-being. At this point, we can as well talk about, I can notice in my practice a lot of stress on the maternity when immigrants or refugees, they don't know how to raise their kids. They start to have doubts about what is correct or not. That in general for women, maternity, motherhood is such a stressful factor. For immigrants and refugees is really, really something concerning on their well-being. Sometimes they're afraid of the social services, the children protection, because they really don't know what is acceptable or not. And this is such a stressful situation for most of the immigrants' moms. They have we have evidences, they have in studies about the behaviors associated with social status. There was this study with some monkeys, and we can see on the later age, when the high social status confers priority of access to resources, when we're talking about privileges, just because the group of you belong is usually the first to have access to the resources. And we can notice that in the pandemic, as well, because the language barrier and the social interaction, but anyway, it is associated with social status, the priority of access to resources. We can see how these monkeys start to develop. The bee is vigilant, scanning of the social environment is characteristic of subordinates, pretty much like an observer. Vigilant is and letter C, subordinates receive more aggression from more dominant monkeys. And this is so common, but of course I've received in my practice and in the human version, when subordinates are more likely than dominants to exhibit depressive behavior, which includes a slumber or collapsed body posture, with open eyes, accompanied by a lack of responsivity to environmental events. That's what we can call like lack of interest, or lack of motivation. But clinically speaking, we're talking about depression. And sadly, we know we have a lot of groups of people crushing another groups of people. We acknowledge the commonality of human experience during this crisis, and that COVID-19 has impacted all groups of society across the world by creating immense psychosocial disturbances. However, it's having a disproportionate impact on those who are already faced with health and social disparities. Remember, immigrants, refugees, in the scale of the pyramid of less privilege, and on the bottom of the privilege or access to resources, they already have the health compromise. And especially it depends from the country or the circumstances they made them to immigrate. We can talk about trauma, post-stress, post-traumatic stress. And when I arrive to the host country, all these interactions can lead to depression, stress, anxiety. We must consider the scale of abilities of the individual as well. Most of them have lack of social support, besides the Red Cross or the institutions that receive them. And they they have a schedule to meet them. It's called a program, but it's nothing like natural in social interactions, and people really miss that and need that, and because they actually lost contact with important people for them, and they usually want to create important relationships, but it's difficult. Now with the COVID, it was much more difficult because in Iceland, there was not exactly a lockdown, but there were restrictions of gathering and the distance. So refugees, they usually have to adapt on the host country, like meeting people, visiting places. But during the pandemic, this was really, really bad. They couldn't meet even the social workers and persons, and not their people, the guides from the Red Cross. They have to contact by telephone, and it was really difficult sometimes to communicate due to the language barrier. Refugees are perhaps the most vulnerable of all migrant groups to mental and physical ill health in general. Plus, in the pandemic, the situation is getting really, really bad for them. lack of preparation, attitudes of the new country, poor living conditions, poor of lack of employment and variable social support all add to this vulnerability.
Alma, sorry to interrupt, but we need to wrap up because you have
Yeah.
Okay.
What stigmatization and prejudice, the result of stigmatization is policies which demand that minority groups assimilate, behave, feel, work, and live as the majority groups. This is such a stressful situation. The most stigmatized form of poverty involves relation, governance, economic support, and welfare. Recipients often describe experience of humiliation, dehumanization, denigration, depression, and shame. They express this in private, in the practice, with the psychologists, but not openly. They forget to not feel grateful about this. We should remember that not all the refugees are people without education. Many of them, they already have to move to another countries when they already have a profession and family and a house. And COVID-19 is far from an equalizer in exposed inequalities. Yeah, we have in the COVID-19, all these circumstances for the immigrants, refugees, language barriers, the war in contact with persons. The professional health and psychologists, we must promote the responsiveness and equity. Continually changing, growing, and understanding, because our society is continually changing too, especially on the health profession, the health context with the pandemic. In practice, psychologists should be aware of ways that race, ethnicity, and culture influence assessments and treatments. Tests and assessments are often not validated with minority samples. We cannot considering them as the same groups as the majorities. Clinicians need to focus on the individual with whom they are interacting and explore individual factors such as family, employment, social groups. Because social and economical stress is often the root cause of emotional problems. Alleviating such stress can often alleviate the mental health problems as well. We cannot put everything in the psychological spheres, but we can always contribute to the well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. I'm sorry I had to stop.
No, it's perfect for me.
We have limited time, and I think you gave us a clear picture of the psychological aspects and your experience with refugees and migrants. And now we will move on to Anna Maria Wojtynska, who is an anthropologist, postdoctoral researcher at the University of Iceland. Thank you, Anna.
Oh, thank you, Nelly. And can I ask Alma to stop sharing so I can share my screen?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will share my presentation. Okay, and I just, thank you very much for inviting me for this panel. I'm learning a lot listening to you, and just to say a few words more about myself. I've been studying Polish migrants to Iceland for the last 20 years. However, my focus was transnational practices and position on the labor market. Now I'm studying integration of migrants in rural areas in Iceland. So I was not studying particular situation of migrants caused by this COVID-19 crisis, or not looking so much at gender violence, gender-based violence. I actually have been organizing closed groups meetings for Polish women living in Iceland that are survivors of domestic violence. But I'm not so much going to focus on this experience in my presentations, but I can answer your question in case you have. And before I go to some points in relation to this how global pandemic affected migrants in Iceland, I would like to just, I don't know how to, the slide is not changing. Okay, so I will just, I want to start from some background information regarding Polish migrants in Iceland. Because I'm also one of the migrants, we have been the largest group of immigrants since 1996. And with little more than 20,000 registered residents, Poles made 37% of the total immigrant population. So we are the far largest immigrant group in Iceland, and 6% of the total Icelandic population in 2020. Migration from Poland can be described as predominantly labor migration, driven by fish processing, service sector, building industry, and recently tourism sector. Most of the Polish migrants are concentrated in low-wage jobs, and migration is often intended as temporary, but frequently prolonged, sometimes even altering into settlement. One of the prominent results of the global pandemic, a part of this acute disruption of mobility and different kinds of insecurities, is the economic destabilization, including employment insecurity. And according to a report that was published by Research Institute, Verdite, at the beginning of this year, the economic difficulties caused by the pandemic have harmed, according to their findings, the economic difficulties harmed the employment security of migrants more than employment security of the native Icelandic. And here you see the graph about the increase of the number of unemployed migrants and unemployed Polish migrants, but also. So the number was 3,460 individuals in December 2019, but it jumped to 8,793 in October 2021. And the unemployment rate in April 2020 was 10.4 among general population, but it was as high as 24% among among foreign citizens. And majority of job losses were accounted in tourism industry, hotels, restaurants, and other services. And those are exactly those sectors with the high share of immigrant workers. And it's also important, and it was already said in other presentations, while some were losing their jobs in the aftermath of the pandemic outbreak, others were deprived of this possibility to work at home. And at the same time, considerable proportion of these elementary occupations that could not be suspended or moved home are exactly done by migrants. And this includes, for example, those people working in cleaning that actually faced additional strains in relation to sanitary restrictions. Some were working in places where it might have been difficult to maintain social distancing, like for example in fish processing. So some factories were introducing like shifts, but still, it was kind of difficult to maintain this requirement of distancing too. And significantly, the pandemic displayed fragility of the current organization of the labor. It's largely dependent on migrant workers in certain employment sectors. For instance, migrants play a critical role in global food supply. According to UNHCR, 1/4 of farm work is done by migrant workers. Therefore, to maintain work in agriculture, migrants were often exempt from traveling restrictions. And Iceland, among other countries, introduced so-called work quarantine permits, which allow going to work while being on quarantine. Of course, if certain conditions are met. So this dependency, for example, became apparent in Iceland in case of slaughtering house. I posted a picture from the news that was talking about this. Because of the lockdowns, some workers were not able to come to Iceland. Icelandic employers had to look for workers elsewhere, and those that were coming, of course, they were required to go on quarantine, which considerably delayed the work in slaughtering. And my final point that I wanted to share with you relates with this process of othering of Polish migrants that was interlinked with the pandemic. The Icelandic media coverage of some of the groups encouraged ostracism, xenophobic opinions and verbal violence, often expressed in social media, but also in public spaces. So, some infections or group infections were traced to Poles, bringing this kind of xenophobic opinions. And Polish migrants were framed as health threat, along with being portrayed as economic burden because so many lost jobs and were unemployed. So their traveling was penalized or criticized. So what I'm showing on the picture on the side, in response of those public discussions, there was a campaign launched on Facebook where Poles were adding framed on their profile picture saying, "I'm Polish, I follow sanitary rules and recommendations." So they kind of try to disassociate with this picture of Poles being disobedient and almost like intentionally spreading the virus in Iceland. So thank you very much. Those are my main points. I tried to speed up also because I know we are running out of time already. So thank you, and I wait for questions.
Thank you, Anna. This was really, really interesting, and you pointed out to a different aspect of the pandemic, which has to do with transnational labor, which is, of course, really, really important and very rarely addressed. Our next speaker is Sonia Ahmadi. She's an activist, public speaker, entrepreneur, and research advisor at the NTNU in Norway. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. It is such an honor to be participating in this important discussion, and I'm very glad to be here with you guys. So as you said, I'm originally from Afghanistan, and I came to Norway as an asylum seeker. So for me, being active and involved in integration and inclusion of newcomers in the Norwegian society and in the Norwegian job market it's more like personal, you know, because I know how it is to be new in a country, how it is to, what challenges you face when you have to start from zero. So now we are talking about Norway. Nearly 15% of the Norwegian population is immigrants. But when we talk about immigrants and immigration, there are four types of immigration. One is like the labor immigrants, people who come to work to Norway or any other country. It's like the general definition, people who go to immigrate to get an education. And then we have refugees who come on the basis of protection. And then we have the family reunification, which is the fourth type. My focus will not be so much on the labor immigrants and the ones who come, like students who come to get an education, but mostly on refugees and family reunification. So refugees or asylum seekers, actually, because first you immigrate to a country and seek asylum or seek protection because your life was in danger in your own country. And after that, you have got a legal residence permit. That's when you get the status of a refugee. Some of the speakers before me, they gave a very good and like a specific overview and picture of how vulnerable refugees are. So we all agree on that. Refugees are vulnerable, both because they come from a different culture to a culture which is totally new to them, the language is new to them, the social codes, and they have less access to the resources, as Alma pinpointed in her speech. They're more inclined to the mental problems such as depression due to the lack of social support. And like most of the refugees who come based on the basis of protection as asylum seekers, they come from war zones, countries such as Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Eritrea, Somalia. So it's like Middle East, Asia, and Africa. And of course, there will be a huge difference. So it's very difficult for them to start from zero, and it makes them vulnerable. And at the same time, most of people who come from war zones, they even don't have their documents with them to prove that they have an education, to prove that they have worked and they have work experience. So this makes them like even more vulnerable. When we talk about refugees, in Norway, 4.4% of Norway's population, and this amount around 240 people are refugees. And then we can divide refugees into two groups, asylum seekers and quota refugees. The difference is that the quota refugees are the ones who do not travel by themselves, but that they are being transferred by the UN because their lives are in danger. So when we are speaking about women, women are actually vulnerable. Women with a refugee background are vulnerable within the vulnerable group. You see, Alma gave us some factors for how women are being discriminated based on different factors such as age, social status, and all that. But also there are some other explanations to why women are more vulnerable. Sometimes from war zones, men come first to Norway. So they learn the language, they get a job, they establish a life, they get a house, and after that they apply for family reunification to get reunited with their family. So when the woman comes, it's more like they come to an established life. They might want to just give birth to more babies, which make them more vulnerable. But also in most cultures, women are the main caregivers and the men are the breadwinners. And when you are a caregiver, your job is to take care of the children, cook and clean, and be at home. And this is how they do not have the opportunity to learn the language or get an education, get a job, and earn their own money and be economically independent. And I can promise, no matter where you live, whether you live in Europe, Scandinavia, or third world, when you do not have that economic independence, you are vulnerable. So all these have their own consequences. You see, like when women do not learn the language or have like very few knowledge, they speak less, they're not able to build a new network, or they have like very small network of few friends. They do not work outside the house, or even if they work outside the house, because they do not have an education or are not really good in the language, they have low paid jobs. And this again restricts their chance to come in contact with the overall population and other people. So actually women with refugee background in Norway, they have very small networks. And especially with the integration policy of Norway, which is dispersed settlement, I know cities in Norway which are like super small, and there lives only 2 or 3 Afghan families. And if one of them like moves out or anything happens to them, the other one is like left devastated, because then they don't have anyone to hang out with. So now let's look at this in a COVID-19 context. You know, during the pandemic, as Tatiana gave us a very good overview of gender-based violence, we saw that the violence against women increased globally. It happened in Norway too. And as Olga gave us a very good, in her presentation, pinpointed that people are not safe even in their own houses, in their own homes, because it's like they live so much close. In Norway too, I know women with refugee backgrounds, for example, Kurdish women. I have a very large network. I know Kurdish women who were hairdressers, who were waitresses in hotels, and they lost their jobs because they had these low-paid jobs that were impacted by the lockdown. I know women who had low-paid jobs that required them to be physically available, and that's how they were more exposed to the virus. So what happened during the pandemic is that women lost their contacts, lost their networks, their language skills decreased. Although in Norway, we have different organizations that work with integration and inclusion of refugees, such as Red Cross. Sana is going to tell you more about that. I have worked both as an employee and as a volunteer there. I'm still a volunteer there, but also we have centers and organizations that work specifically for women. And during COVID-19, some of them had very little to almost no activities. You see, for example, my mother, she's a woman with a refugee background. She had this network, she was going to these centers. And of course, you know, when she came from Afghanistan as like a 45 or something plus 45 plus years old woman, she did learn the language, she had a job, but then she had some health challenges which left her unemployed. So now she was going to these centers that had some activities for them, like dancing, Pilates, just hanging out with other people and her friends. And when the lockdown and the COVID and the social distancing began, they had almost no contact. So although many organizations resumed their activities, it's in a much smaller scale. So I think that the questions that should be asked in the aftermath of pandemic should be that in this pool of vulnerabilities, you know, the increased violence, the job losses, exposure to the coronavirus, economic instability, you know, the literal social distancing, losing contacts and networks and all this. How will all this impact the mental health of women with multicultural or refugee background? Women who were already vulnerable even before the pandemic. What kind of challenges will it create in the long term, both for the women, for the families and the children of these women? What we as a society either could have done better and different or should do better in the future. So in Norway, there was a lot of focus, and still there is a lot of focus on restrictions and preventing the spread of the coronavirus, which is very important. Again, it's important to do so because of the higher prevalence of COVID-19 among immigrants. And more people with an immigrant background are hospitalized than the Norwegians. So it's important. But again, like in the aftermath of COVID-19, we should ask what initiatives, what activities do we need to compensate for what is lost? You see, should we intensify integration initiatives and activities that we already have? Should we do them the same way? Should we use the lessons that we have learned and be more prepared and do better in the future? So I myself, I have established an organization for, it's a very new organization for Afghan women in Norway called Afghan Norwegian Women for Change. The main idea is to give these women the information that they need and not what the state and the society think they should have.
Sonia, sorry to interrupt, but we need to move on to the end of your presentation because
yes,
we don't have.
Let's move on. So I hope I'm actually done. I hope that the future is brighter with better activities and better initiatives for women all around the world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sonia, very much for your presentation. And now we have the final participant in today's discussion, Sanna Julie Rodsen Jacobsen. She's an expert on experience and event design, public health, equality and diversity, and her research focuses on unaccompanied minor refugees and Norwegian volunteering families for the Red Cross. And she has also worked on the integration of young refugee girls into Norwegian society. Thank you, Sanna.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me, first of all. I'm learning so much when I'm listening to all of you. My name is Sanna, and I'm a master's student at NTNU in Trondheim, Norway. I'm currently studying a master's in equality and diversity, and I have a bachelor, as you said, in public health and experience and event design as well. And at this moment of time, I'm writing in a master's thesis about the integration of unaccompanied minor refugees through an activity that is called Friend Family. And the activity is led by the Red Cross of Trondheim. And Trondheim Red Cross Friends Family is aimed at unaccompanied minor refugees between the age of 15 and 23. And this is both for boys and girls, but mostly when I've interviewed my informants, I see that there are boys. And the aim of the activity is to counteract loneliness and help these young people feel a sense of belonging into their new home country. And the youth and the friends family, they meet once a week and they decide together what they want to do. And it can be everything from getting to know the neighborhood, helping the kids with their homework, or just having dinner, things that integrate them to the Norwegian society. And also, I am now volunteering for the Red Cross, a group called the Girls Group. And the Girls Group is a meeting place for girls aged 15 to 25 who want to get to know other girls the same age, but also from different cultures. And the volunteers, as myself, can be a little bit older. I'm 32, but that doesn't matter as long as you want to make a safe space for them and contribute to a comfortable and a nice space where they can feel that they are welcomed into the city of Trondheim. So that's what we're working for. And the girl group was created by the Red Cross because we know that it can be very difficult to make new friends in a new country and with a new and different culture. And through this group, this may become a little bit easier. And there is a focus on getting to know each other across cultural backgrounds. So we talk when we do different activities. People exchange ideas or thoughts about how do you do it where you come from, right? And the girls group is based at a place called Fellesverket, and in English that means joint work. And this is the youth center that is localized in the city center of Trondheim. And some of the girls, the reason why we have a girl group is because that we know that some of the girls prefer to be with other girls, might be because they have experienced things that they want to feel safe around other women or girls, but also sometimes because they would not be allowed to participate actually if there were boys there. The thing that is nice with the girls group also is that at Fellesverket, the joint work youth center, we have a lot of different activities for all youth. But the thing is, we know that the girls will come to our activities because they're only girls. But after a while, the parents might also understand that we have adults there. So they will never be alone. They will always be safe. And even though we're not with the boys, we sometimes meet up. So only that little interaction of seeing that we're going to do our own little thing with the girls group, going to take a boat trip or whatever it is, we know that they start to interact. And I've also seen that some of the girls after a while come along to the other activities that includes everyone. So it can actually be a gap or a bridge for the girls to be able to do things in Norwegian society that they weren't supposed to do or weren't allowed to do before. So that is very nice to see that they actually open up a little bit. And yeah. So it's I'm sorry. Yeah, in the girls group, we have a lot of different activities, and it's everything from bowling to cinema, theater, everything actually. The girls can actually ask what they want. If they want something. One of the girls said to me like previously that, you know what, I don't know how to swim. Can you teach me how to swim? And I said, yeah, we can. But will there be boys there? No, we can book ahead and we can check. So that is also one of the very important things that we take very seriously, that we listen to the girls. What do they need to be able to do what they want? And they're youth, right? So they want to do everything else that everyone wants to do. So they've been climbing, they do everything, and it's amazing. So, but we have everything from, yeah, we've been bowling. We went actually on a boat trip very recently to see Trondheim, and that was a very, very special experience for me, myself personally, but I think also the girls, because we were taking this small wooden boat out around Trondheim, and suddenly it was very much like big waves. And one of the girls turned around to me and she told me that, you know what, I haven't been in a boat since I went over to Greece with a boat. And I was a little bit like, I didn't know how to respond. I was like, are you okay though? Should we turn back around? And she was like, no, I chose to be on this boat now. And I'm so happy because now I can choose that this ride with the boat is something happy and I'm creating new, nice memories. And that shows how impactful activities like a girl group or also the buddy group from that allows boys also to come. But it is amazing to just be able to work as a volunteer and welcome them and actually be able to listen. What do you need? We have some things that we can do, but you can also express your wishes and wants. So yeah, and yeah, parallel with these, when we are, I'm so sorry. When we are making the activities, the volunteers are discussing what is the best way to make sure that we meet all cultural needs also. Because sometimes we wanted to go out in the forest and just make marshmallows. And some of the girls that were volunteers didn't know that that contained pig, right? Or pork. So things like we have to constantly learn both sides about how to make activities that are good for the girls, that is also not, yeah, I don't know how to say that, but it is very, we learn from them because the girls are, they're not shy, they're very open-minded and they laugh when we do something that we, for example, we don't know everything. And it's so great because we actually create this good bond that wasn't meant because we were supposed to just make social activities, but we create bonds because, for example, I'm a little bit older than the girls, and sometimes they ask me questions about, you know what, how did you get to, I work with elderly also. Where did you work? Who do you speak to? Who can I contact? Where do I get the vaccine, right? So they ask a lot of different questions, and we become kind of their big sister role models when we're together with them every week. And that is also a really nice, or for some girls, we might become role models because we know how the Norwegian society functions.
Sama, sorry, but we only have 10 minutes
for
the questions and the answers. So can you please,
Yeah, the only thing I would like to end with saying is that we know how important it is for socialization, and it is not possible to integrate without socialization at all. And with this special time, the socialization prevents mental illness, and we know that the youth is especially vulnerable, and we know also that the immigrants are even more so. So it is in fact so important that we stand on the other side and welcome people. And yeah, I think I'm looking forward to the discussion now, if it's something left.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You were the last one, and unfortunately there was no time left. So thank you, Sana. Now we have time for discussion. Maybe we can stay a little bit longer because we started late. We already have one question by Sisi Vovu. Sisi, would you like to ask the question? Are you? Yes.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I just came less than 20 to 15 minutes ago because we have so many things to attend, very important and very interesting, like this series of events from Panteion University. Now, what I would like to ask Sana, what is the percentage of women, of girls, who would need such a support in relation to the whole number, say, about, not, I don't ask for any concrete numbers because I sort of question if there is a broad appeal or if it is limited to very small groups. Of course, to very small group is also good, but I would like to know something. Thank you very much.
Okay, we can take some more questions and then for the previous speakers as well. So we have Danai Vlahu. Would you like to?
Hi, thank you for all these very interesting facts that have been set out and presented to us from various sources. My comment, it wasn't even a question, my comment was on the last presentation from Sana Jakobsen. And it's a happy occasion that there are groups like the one she presented who are helping people who are refugees, girls in that case, and they present not just the quality of one being a refugee, but the whole quality of each and every person and the differentiations from one another that enriches all. The fact that she so clearly mentioned that they also get to learn and get new information about different parts of different countries and different cultures, and they integrate that, not just come here, come to my country, let me show you the ways as they are here, because the only facet of you that I see is the fact that you have been displaced, the fact that you are an immigrant or a refugee or whatever, which is the usual image that we make for ourselves for people who are refugees or immigrants, this specific quality, but they include so many qualities as each and every one of us does, and we keep forgetting.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Tomais, we have one more question.
Yes.
Can you read it?
We have one more question, yes. Antigone says we're facing a well-structured patriarchal capitalism system which marginalizes individuals belonging to the social groups mentioned before, such as refugees, women, etc. We have been fighting for years for things that should be given for everyone. So, based on the research or statistics that have been done, do you believe in a profound social change? Is a total shift possible in a long term? That's a question from Adigoni.
Okay, thank you, Adigoni. And then Maria Stratigaki, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, hello everybody. Thanks for so interesting speeches we had today. Thank you all, the speaker on behalf of the Center for Gender Studies, the organizers. So I think it's very important to see how many similarities we have, although we talk about the situation in very completely different countries, very long distances between the north and the south and so on. But nevertheless, we realize a lot of similarities in the questions. Certainly when we talk about women, migrant women, and I think this is very important. It comes to the heart of the project, of the philosophy of our project, to discuss on these common challenges. So my general question, because I work for social policy since a lot of years, and I try always to find the kind of opportunities, some good thing out of the misery, out of the problems. So being, let's say, trying to be a little bit optimist, I would like to ask all of you who have experiences in the field on working with migrant communities, if you think that despite all the problems and the separation and the isolation that the COVID has brought, if you think that in the aftermath there are some there is some chances for improvement, for a good, let's say, for a better quality of contact, of connection between migrants and native women or the communities, if links between the communities will be stronger after the COVID. So is there any, let's say, light in the end of the tunnel, to be a little bit more optimist, coming now out of the very, very miserable 1 year and a half? So this is my question to everybody who has the feeling of the field, not in theory, because in theory is easier, I think. But when you are down in the field, you have to know.
Okay.
You know more.
So
yeah, that's it.
So we have, I think, Tatiana, would you like to ask a question as well? And then we will have a round of all the speakers and a final round,
I didn't want to ask a question. I wanted to answer the question that Maria Stratigaki just asked.
Okay,
if you want, but I can do it later if you want.
No, that's fine. You can start, okay. And then the other speakers will have time to
that's fine.
To respond to these issues that were raised.
Yes, because I think I am among those who have a very good feeling of the field. So I would say that, of course, this is a very complicated issue and it needs a lot of work, but it also depends a lot on the relevant policies. It always depends on the relevant policies, if they're going to encourage that or not. There is some work that has been done, so there is some ground that we can build on. I even said during my presentation about the capacity building that we had done to refugee women, and that they were supporting each other. In general, we also bring them in contact with the local women as well, but of course we couldn't at that point. So there is some work that we can build on that has already been done, but we also need support from different policies, from the framework. That's what I want to say.
Okay, thank you, Tatiana. And then Jana, would you like to say a few words as well? Sorry. Sana, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah.
Can you respond to the questions?
Yeah, I think I remember. To Sissy, I want to say that actually me personally, I don't sit on any numbers of how many girls there are out there, but we know that there are probably many more that comes to us. So the thing that we have to do all the time is to kind of recruit, right? We have to make it possible for them to see these activities, but how they actually come is through other friends. So when they feel that they're safe with a friend that they've made here, that friend will probably bring them to us, and then they feel safer, right? Because then the parents also feel much more safe about the whole, okay, where are you going? This is a new city. They don't know all the how it is, and the social community here, right? It's quite different. And but the thing is, when they know that it's a clear-cut girls group, it is a lot of the boat trip. I think we were 12 girls, and it was fully booked because it could have been more, but I can also see when there are new things that the girls haven't done before that they want to do or try out, suddenly there's so many. So, and it differs from, it's not like it's the same person that comes all the time. It differs from week to week, but it is now we have a really big group of Syrian girls, and if one comes, it's very many of the other girls that will also come around. So and I will also say to you, Dana, to respond, that I think the same. I hope that it was like that before I started, but I look forward to see them, because they teach me so much, and also this has been something great to look forward to every week for us volunteers as well, because it is COVID, right? And luckily we have been able to focus on the youth here in Norway, so that we had to lock down for a little bit also, but the youth part and Red Cross could open up much sooner. So that has been a really positive thing for the girls, I think, and also the boys, of course. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sana. And Sonia, would you like to say a few words? Because I think what you've been describing is a kind of different model than the Red Cross, because precisely it's based on a bottom-up experience and participation of migrant women in these activities rather than volunteering only. So could you tell us?
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to say a few words regarding the last question, which was if there is any light in the end of the tunnel. I think there is definitely some light based on my experience as a woman with a refugee background who came to Norway from a country like Afghanistan, like two totally different countries, and then I built a life, and now I'm working with integrating others who are in the same situation that once I was. I would like to say that there are already some activities that are being initiated, for example, in Norway, and now the activities are being done in more innovative ways, you know, because during the pandemic, we learned some really important lessons, and we have become better, and in the future, we will be even better. For example, now like people can have virtual meetings, virtual training, Pilates that people I'm collaborating with these centers who have activities for women with refugee backgrounds, and now they're doing like yoga, Pilates and all these different activities through like virtually. And also there is one aspect which is very, very important, and I want to mention it, is that refugees themselves who also have some responsibility to integrate themselves and include themselves into the host society. Maybe before they didn't appreciate so much the activities that were there for them, you know? Like I have worked with the girls group at Red Cross. I was an employee, and we noticed that the girls, like they were not meeting, like the activities were there, but there were not so many people who were meeting up. And I think that during the pandemic, they learned how important these integration activities are for them, for networking, for socializing. So I think from now on, they will participate more and appreciate these activities more. And also the third factor that I want to mention is that the overall population of Norway now knows how it is to be, you know, isolated and not to have anything to do and not to have the ability to have contacts with the people you love. So I think that in the future, we will get more people who will be willing to be, for example, to volunteer at Red Cross just to help people who needs to be integrated into the society. Yes.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you. Alma, would you like to say a few final words?
Yes, thanks. I just want to give my last apportation as a health professional. I would like to talk about like it takes two to tango. It's necessary as well educate the host population and reduce the stigma, because we cannot make to feel good people isolated from their living conditions or their development conditions. You can get like hobbies and activities, but they need as well to develop as a human being in any place they decide or they should be. That's it. And since the psychological perspective, we can promote the well-being and collaborate as well and making policies, but not everything is from the psychological sphere. It's nothing wrong with these people. It's just their experience of life. And yeah, just let's dance tango.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Anna, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, I think like most of the questions were answered, and I come from different maybe perspective to those issues, looking mostly on labor migration and labor migrants, and also migrants within the European Union. So I mean, in some sense, Polish migrants are already privileged compared to refugees, and they have more access to social welfare and other institutional support. But I mean, still, in terms of the bright future, I mean, I agree with Tatiana. I mean, it's really important to have a right social policies, and it has to go hand in hand with this bottom work. And I mean, in terms of labor market, I mean, we really need to sort of turn from these neoliberal policies and fight for economic equality. And I believe that it will also increase social equalities and benefit women and makes the women, I mean, for more strong position for migrants, refugees, and so for women in those groups. So it's just short comment to this question.
I think this is a really important point, and I think it makes a lot of sense to stress that migration is not only about asylum seekers and refugees, and it has different aspects and it's multifaceted. And of course, what you were saying about economic inequalities, which are also gendered, doesn't apply only to economic migrants, it also applies to refugees, and it's a it's a huge issue. And finally, Olga, are you there? Are you still listening to us? Do you want to say a few final words? I think, I'm not sure if she can hear us. Anyway, I think we can close the discussion now. Thank you all for your interventions and your questions, and all of you who attended. We hope to keep the discussion going. The project will go on for 1 more year. And here is Olga. Olga, would you like to say a few final words? We gave the...
No, I think it was really interesting to hear all of these perspectives. So many places. So I don't know. It doesn't make sense to close now.
Okay, so all our discussions and talks are at our website. You can find them on Facebook and all the recordings, and on our website. And please join us for future events. You can subscribe to our newsletter to find out about the next events that we have organized. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Very interesting
Thank you. Bye-bye.
activities that you organize.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.